I stopped fighting my cousin for men and started spoiling her instead. In my first life, I married a cold CEO who never loved me. In my second, I stole my cousin's future husband only to discover he preferred men. After two spectacularly disastrous marriages, bankruptcy, and dying alone at 47, I was given a third chance. This time, I wasn't choosing either man. I was choosing my cousin. Chapter 1. My name is Diana Bennett, and I was the spoiled, wicked cousin of the female lead. Or at least that's what I called my cousin Claire, after we were both reborn and she came out on top. Again. In my first life, I picked the rich CEO husband, Julian Graves. He was cold to me. Never liked me, no matter what I wore or how beautiful I was. No matter how many tears I cried. No matter how much I complained to my parents. He wasn't a bad husband, but he didn't love me, and I knew it. Julian was so painfully uninterested in me that it drove me crazy. Growing up with a lot of love, I expected the same from my husband. In the end, I ended up living a glamorous yet empty lifestyle. In my second life, I chose first again. This time, I chose the man my cousin, Claire, had married the first time. The up-and-coming architect, Liam Mercer. He never hid his love for my cousin, and I had always seethed with jealousy while watching them on TV. I went into the marriage with Liam eagerly, but I quickly found once again that I wasn't truly wanted, and he didn't love me. This bastard only pretended for the cameras, but the moment we were home, he was distant, as if I barely existed. Still, I clung to the marriage because Claire had found happiness with him, and I wanted that too. And then one day, Liam brought home his mistress, which turned out to be a mister. No wonder. No wonder my cousin never had children in the first life. We divorced after 2 years. As for my family, we went bankrupt because of my scandals and the hidden clauses in my marriage contract with Liam. The bastard. Was this why Claire had never divorced him? In the second life, my cousin was no longer someone that could be stepped on. Julian Graves stood by her in a way he had never stood by me. I met Claire again 1 year after my divorce. She was pregnant, rich, vibrant, and beautiful. I also learned then that she had also been reborn. It turned out that in our first life, Claire had been used as a beard and had accepted it. She had long found the traps in the marriage agreement that my parents hadn't noticed. Neither of us had ever been happy in our first marriages. I was the blind fool in both lives. She looked at me with cold eyes and asked if I had finally gotten what I wanted. And then she walked away and never contacted me or my parents again. Life went on as it always did. It took me a while to get my footing, but eventually I was able to start a career as a beautician. Makeup, nails, hair, styling, I could do it all. Eventually, I built a small business. As for my parents, the light never came back to their eyes, always wanting what we didn't have anymore, but I could say nothing because I had been the one to ruin everything. Yet, they didn't blame me. They always made excuses for me even after everything. My parents truly were fools for me. With all of us working, we were able to live modest but comfortable lives. My parents both passed when I was 42, one right after the other. In the end, they told me that they didn't blame me, and that they were sorry they failed me. I cried and felt like the worst person in the world. And then Diana Bennett, I died at the age of 47. I collapsed from a stroke and no one around to call an ambulance. Claire was on the TV giving a donation to a children's center. There she was, beautiful, smiling, and happy. I didn't feel angry. Instead, I smiled too, genuinely happy because even though she wasn't physically here, I didn't die truly alone. So, imagine my surprise when I woke up at the age of 18 on the day I was to select my husband. Again. Chapter 2. The alarm on my phone woke me with a jolt. I turned it off and read the note. The day I choose my destiny. Oh, gross, I cringed to myself. My mind cleared and it became very clear, very quickly, that I had returned to the day I was to select my husband. Honestly, I want to throw out both men. One of them was romantically incompatible with me. The other one was sexually incompatible with me. I sat there for a few minutes wondering how to convince my parents and then realized that I didn't need to. As evidenced from both lives, my parents would bend over backward for me. But if I went back in time, again was Claire back as well? I threw off my covers and went to her bedroom. I flung the door open and then frowned at the figure on the bed that had been startled awake. I stomped up to her bed and grabbed her shoulders and stared into her eyes. My cousin stared back at me, both bewildered and frightened. Good. If she was the Claire from the last life, there would probably only be coldness or anger in her eyes. Her cousin in the last life had been no pushover, but this one still seemed to be one. I released her. Claire sat on her bed, tense. Cousin, I started seriously, there is something you need to be aware of. You are an absolute pushover. I paused for dramatic effect. And only I, Diana Bennett, can bully you. Do you understand? Claire stared at her uncomprehendingly. I continued. If I sent you into the world like this, what would become of you? I mean, just now, I grabbed you and you just took it. What if I had been a man, huh? Her cousin opened her mouth and then closed it. Unsure. I flipped my long, luscious blonde hair back. Now, you listen to me. You are my cousin. Therefore, you are somebody by association. From now on, cousin, I will help you grow a spine. I headed toward the door, turned back, and pointed a manicured finger at the flabbergasted figure in the bed. Come to my room in 30 minutes. We'll begin our training then. I strode out the door, my heart pounding with exhilaration and adrenaline. I hadn't gone insane despite what my cousin may believe. Instead, I had made a choice. In this life, I wouldn't choose a man. I would choose Claire. Chapter 3. Claire entered my room cautiously. She was wearing jeans and a wrinkled t-shirt, her shoulder-length brown hair tied back. I sneered. Truly an affront to my eyes. This was indeed Claire from the first life, because in the second life, her wardrobe and the way she carried herself were the first things she had changed. I stood and pulled her roughly to my walk-in closet. You look like a hobo. I'm sick of you walking around like this. Truthfully, it wasn't her fault, but I wasn't about to admit it out loud. I held up an orange blouse to her, shook my head, and then grabbed another, a light blue. I nodded and threw it at her, then turned around and rummaged for a pair of jeans that didn't look like they came out of Walmart. Put these on. She looked startled, but didn't complain. She just did as she was asked in true pushover manner. My eyes lit up when she exited the dressing room. See, your figure isn't bad, you just need better fitting clothes. Since I'm tired of you looking like a bum we're going shopping, I already got the card from Dad. In a whirlwind, we were at an upscale mall. I swiped the card like a wild woman, dragging my cousin from store to store and dressing her up like a little doll. 3 stores and her anxiety built up and she said she had enough clothes. I glared at Claire and leaned in and said menacingly, Today you are my dress-up doll. How else are we supposed to play dress-up if my doll doesn't have any decent clothes? You can't keep borrowing mine. Who says I want to share clothes with you? I threw my nose in the air and huffed. Claire shut up after that, and we shopped until noon and my stomach growled. I had neglected food in my shopping frenzy. Truly, it had been too long since I could let loose and splurge. I looked at my cousin annoyed. Aren't you hungry? Why didn't you say something? Diana, we were shopping and I didn't want to, she started. I cut her off. You think I care about that? Now, I'm hungry too. If you had said something earlier, we could have eaten, but now my stomach is growling. I shamelessly pushed the blame to her and also the credit card. I'm hungry. Go get us something from the food court. I don't feel like going to a restaurant. It'll take too long. Make sure there is enough for us to eat. Don't be stingy. And then I plopped myself down at a table and stared at my manicure. It wasn't a very good one. The place I used to go to must be overpriced trash. I clicked my tongue and then scrolled through the news on my phone. By the time I was done, my cousin was back with a big tray of food. She'd gotten us both salads with extra grilled chicken and grapes, 2 fruit cups with strawberries and grapes only, 2 bottles of strawberry-flavored sparkling water, and a large fries to share with a side of barbecue sauce instead of ketchup to dip them in. Claire had gotten all of my favorites. I stared down at the food and then stood up to snatch the card back from her. I'll be back. There is something else I wanted. I hurried away before she could see my reddened eyes. In 2 lives, only my parents had bothered to remember what I liked. Not even my husband's. Or at least, that's what I had believed. It turns out there was one more person. I bought 2 milkshakes. Mine strawberry and hers cookies and cream. Claire's favorite. She stared when I set hers down on the table but didn't say anything. My parents were waiting for us when we get back from the mall. They were sitting in the living room with 2 files on the table. I took a deep breath and then made my decision. No, I had already chosen. Now, I just needed to double down. Chapter 4. Olivia and Richard Bennett were good parents. To me, anyways. Claire was always an afterthought, and I had selfishly cultivated that mindset in them. Now, though, I was about to overturn years of brainwashing. I hoped their brains didn't implode. After my parents went over the profiles of both men, Claire went very still. I turned to her and searched her face to see if she had been reborn. Instead, she just seemed very pale and frightened. I breathed a sigh of relief. I still had time to fix things. Mom, Dad, I don't want to get married. My parents turned to me stunned, but before they can talk, I continued. I've thought about it, and I want to put off marriage first. I don't want to marry out. Instead, I want to focus on other things. I have some good business ideas. What's so good about marrying them? One is rich and the other is going to be rich soon? Who cares? I was on a roll. I continued passionately and with a touch of bitterness. Why can't I make my own money instead of marrying into it? Then I could just marry a husband in and never have to leave mom and dad. And those types of rich and suspiciously single men always have some sort of problems. Besides, what if I marry? And it turns out we are not compatible. What if I end up with a hollow marriage? I pointed at the table angrily. Also, I just remembered. These 2 men are definitely not compatible with me. Julian Graves is cold and his temperament does not align with mine. And Liam Mercer is... I paused and lean in and say in a loud whisper. I mean, no offense, but he's a closet case. My parents stared at me uncomprehendingly, but Claire covers her mouth slowly. It seemed I had to clarify things for the boomers. He's gay? My mom sat down abruptly on the couch. My dad slowly sat down with her, and they both looked at me as if the world was upside down. After saying my piece, I felt good, as if I truly had dodged a bullet. 2 of them, named Julian and Liam. But then I looked at Claire. I hesitated and then gestured towards a file. Julian is a bit cold, but he doesn't seem like he would be a bad husband, if you're interested. In the second life, they had seemed happy, or at least content. I didn't want to block her path. Claire just shook her head. I don't want to get married right now either. She paused and then added quietly, I want to go to college. Her words shocked me because in both lives, Claire hadn't gone to college. In Claire's first life, she had lived as a beard wife, and in the second, she had been the CEO's wife who also had smart investments. But thinking about that cold, controlling man, I understood. For security purposes, he likely hadn't let her go to college, and if he did, she probably only did online degrees. My parents looked at my cousin and then at me. Do you want to go to college? They ignored her asking me instead. My parents actually just straight up ignored her. I winced internally. It seems my brainwashing was far too effective. No, but since my cousin wants to go, we can just send her. And we can't just send her to any university either, because she will be representing our family. We should send her to a university. It is a top university. So even if she graduates with something like an arts degree, it would be impressive. Claire's eyes were locked on me. Her eyes teary, but she also seemed to be smiling, and I was pretty sure that's a good thing. I continued passionately like a woman that has been suppressing her ambition for years. But actually, I was just one that has woken up with a third chance that I'm pretty sure I didn't earn. I want to start a business. Invest. When I make enough money, I will support everyone. Even Dad will be able to retire comfortably and sell the company if he wants. Just give me a few years. No, a year. And this family will be on top of high society and people will be banging down our doors begging for me to marry their sons. My parents no longer seemed shaken. Color returned to their faces. Excitement and pride filled their eyes, as if excited for things I had not even done yet. I smiled helplessly. They loved me to the point of foolishness. Luckily, I loved them as well, and in this life, I wouldn't let them down. Seeing that everything seemed like it was going well, I walked over and stood next to Claire, hugging her arm. Mom, Dad, just look at Claire. She is small, cute, and easily bullied. What if someone devious marries her and tries to pry away our fortune and business? Since she wants to go to college, we should definitely send her and support her well. With our family backing her, who would dare to bully her? They looked at my cousin hesitantly, and my mom reached out and grabbed her hand. Claire, sweetie, don't worry, we will support you. You go to college. If anyone bullies, you let us know. Come, let's fill out the forms for A University. Your grades in high school weren't bad, and surely you'll get in. My dad stood up and nodded towards my cousin. That's right. How about we rent an apartment near the university for you? We'll pay, of course. My parents seemed to be won over. That was too easy. Was this actually a family of pushovers, and I am actually the odd one out? Claire looked overwhelmed, and she looked up at me. Tears almost spilled over, but she held them back with a smile. Yes, I'll go get my laptop. Within 3 hours, my cousin had successfully applied for A University, and even applied for several scholarships she qualified for. I had insisted she apply for them, insisting that it would add to our family prestige. And just like that, within 24 hours, I had changed both of our lives. Chapter 5. The next day, I set my polish bottles on the dining room table one by one. Base coat, top coat, cuticle oil, 3 shades of pink, 2 nude colors, a tiny box of rhinestones. Mom wandered in, glanced at the growing collection, and smiled. Oh, are you going to do your nails? I shook my head. Actually, I want to do yours. My mother beamed. I looked around the room. But first, I pointed dramatically across the room. Claire. She looked up from the book she was reading. Me? Yes, you. Sit here. She blinked. What? I sighed dramatically. Obviously, you're the practice model. I can't just experiment on Mom. I crossed my arms. If I accidentally ruin your nails, who cares? Claire looked down at her hands. I care. I gasped. How selfish. She stared. Come here. She quietly obeyed. Of course she did. About 20 minutes later, I held up her hands and examined them critically. Soft blush pink. A subtle pearl shimmer. Tiny hand-painted white flowers on 2 accent nails. Elegant. Simple, expensive looking. Perfect. I flipped my hair over my shoulder. A slow smirk spread across my face. As expected. I really am a genius. Mom leaned over. Oh my goodness. She took my cousin's hands in hers and admired them. They look professional. Claire stared at her own hands. She turned them one way, then the other. The flowers caught the light. They're beautiful, Diana. I huffed. Obviously. You think I wasted my time on you because I'm incompetent? She looked up at me. Thank you. I immediately looked away and stuck my nose up. I waved a dismissive hand. I only needed someone to practice on. I wasn't doing it for you. You just happened to have hands. A small smile. Okay. I pointed toward the couch and gestured for her to sit. Now don't touch anything, or I'll cry. That night, my cousin sat alone in her bedroom. The bedside lamp cast a warm glow over the room. She found herself looking at her hands again. The polish gleamed softly beneath the light. She traced one tiny painted flower with her thumb. A strange smile slowly appeared on her face. Small, bewildered. She couldn't quite understand it. Lately, her cousin had been different. Caustic but caring. Just what kind of bullying was this? She thought for a long time, and then, after examining her nails one last time, fell asleep with a small smile on her face. Chapter 6. A few weeks later, my cousin was accepted into A University on a partial scholarship. They would pay for 2 years of her schooling. Her art portfolio had been vast and her accomplishments in school impressive. She also obtained two other scholarships that deposited into a private bank account I made sure she had opened before she had even been accepted. I had made a big deal of her getting her own personal bank account, even had Dad transfer some funds because it had looked so pitifully empty. Truthfully, I wanted Claire to have a sense of security if anything unexpected happened. I, on the other hand, burst into the financial and business scene like a wrecking ball. I didn't cut into anyone's livelihood. I didn't steal future ideas, projects, or use my knowledge to blackmail competitors. Instead, I made hefty, smart investments into different companies, small businesses, startups, stocks, and real estate. My father sold his company and followed my investments with his usual blind faith. This time, though, I was truly the smart and reliable daughter he had always bragged about, and I didn't let him down. My parents retired happily enjoying their wealth and health. As for those two terrible husbands of mine, I happened to run into both of them again. I met Julian Graves again on my way to a meeting. Totally unexpected. Totally chilling, but not in a fear way. The elevator doors slid open with a soft ding. I stepped inside, already scrolling through emails on my phone. I frowned. Why did it suddenly feel colder? I looked up. Standing next to me was Julian and a beautiful, dark-haired, and equally cold-looking woman. Julian was still tall, still handsome, still looked like he had never smiled a day in his life. Nah. He glanced at me once before looking back at the glowing floor numbers. Good. I didn't want to talk to him either. The elevator continued upward in complete silence. Third floor, fourth, fifth. The temperature somehow dropped another 5 degrees. I resisted the urge to rub my arms. Was it just me? Or did these people emit cold air? The doors opened on the 7th floor. I stepped out so quickly, it almost counted as fleeing. I whipped out my phone before the elevator doors fully closed. My assistant answered immediately. Boss? I nearly froze to death. A pause. What? On the elevator just now. I swear the temperature dropped 10 degrees in seconds. I felt like I was standing next to two human popsicles. It was like I was inside a commercial freezer. My assistant sighed. I could imagine him pressing up his glasses in fond exasperation. I don't think that's physically possible. It is. My goosebumps say so. I nodded seriously to myself. Then I hummed thoughtfully. Actually, they're pretty compatible. What? They're like? Another pause as I search for the perfect comparison. Two popsicles. You know the kind that you have to break apart. My assistant remained in stunned silence. They looked really good together, though. I nodded in satisfaction. They're probably the most aesthetically pleasing freezer aisle I've ever seen. Boss? Yes? I don't think that's a compliment. It wasn't an insult either. Behind the elevator doors. The elevator hadn't moved. Julian Graves stared silently at the closed doors. Next to him stood his equally expressionless business partner, Nina Holton. They had also needed to get off at that floor. But when that odd woman practically flung herself out of the elevator and proceeded to have a long conversation about them, the awkwardness held them back. The door had slowly slid shut. Neither of them spoke. Instead, exchanged an awkward glance, decided to remain quiet and eavesdrop on the conversation. After a long moment, he looked sideways at her. She looked sideways at him. Neither of them looked particularly offended. If anything, they both seemed strangely thoughtful. Chapter 7. As if seeing Julian Graves again wasn't enough, I also managed to run into Liam Mercer at a charity gala. I had already mentally prepared myself to run into him sooner or later, but it happened in a way I hadn't imagined. These charity galas always rented absurdly large venues. Ballroom, cocktail lounge, terrace, private meeting rooms. My heels clattered quickly. I needed to go to the bathroom. And desperately. Someone had shown me earlier, but I found 3 different hallways that somehow all looked exactly the same, which was precisely how I ended up opening the wrong door. A pause. Oh, there, in one of the smaller sitting rooms, were Liam and another man. Their lips red and cheeks flushed, clothes a hem askew. They both turned toward the door. The room went completely silent. For one long, awkward second. The three of us simply stared at one another. Then my bladder reminded me that I am currently on an urgent mission. I blinked, then rolled my eyes. Without saying a word, I quietly pulled the door shut. Click. A beat passed. Then I knocked twice. Lock the door next time if you're going to hook up. I didn't wait for a response. I simply continued power walking down the hallway in search of the restroom. Honestly, some people had no sense of self-preservation. Just how had Liam managed to keep it a secret in the previous lives? Rounded the corner and finally spotted the restroom sign. Good. Mission accomplished. Let me tell you the sigh that I let out when I sat on that toilet. Pure relief. I made it. As I washed my hands, I caught my own reflection in the mirror. Huh. I really wasn't bothered. Not even a little. Maybe I should have been. After all, once upon a time, that man had been my husband. I had cried because of him. Lost sleep because of him. But that had happened in another life. Another version of me. Another version of him. Somewhere along the way, I'd realized something. I had never really loved him. I had loved the idea of being loved. It had never been about him. He had simply been standing where I'd hoped love would be. And when it never came, I'd mistaken the emptiness for heartbreak. I dried my hands and smiled faintly. As far as I was concerned, he was nothing. Not a regret, not even an old flame. I tossed the paper towel into the trash. Shaking my head, I walked back toward the ballroom, wondering whether they were serving dessert yet. Maybe I could bully my assistant out of his piece too. Backslash. Chapter 8. Time passed. Claire entered university and I grew my fortune. I didn't care about finding love anymore. I cared about money and my own happiness. By the time my cousin graduated university, I had earned hundreds of millions of dollars. I didn't rub it into her face. Okay, that's a lie. I did, and often in my usual lofty manner. I heard your project won first place. A measly $2,000 grant. Here, take $20,000. Midterm exams are soon? Ugh, your face must look terrible staying up so late to study. Disgusting. I'm sending over someone to give you a hot stone massage and a facial. I don't care if you're burnt out over tests. It's spring break and I need someone to carry my bags. You're coming to this all-inclusive resort with me. Your bank account compared to mine is embarrassing. What if I take you somewhere and someone sees? Here's $500,000. Okay, so maybe the last one was a bit flimsy, but you get the gist. It's hard bullying someone with money. Okay. My cousin had long seen through me and knew that this was how I showed I cared about her. Claire never asked me why I changed, just gave me a long hug one day and thanked me. I scoffed and allowed her to hug me, and then I hugged her back, just a tiny bit. Also, I didn't cry. Not at all, really. One day, Claire found a boyfriend. I knew immediately that I needed to take extreme measures. Buzz, buzz, zap! Do you hear that? Want to know what it feels like? If I hear anything bad about you from my cousin, if you so much as breathe at Claire the wrong way. I trailed off ominously and then, buzz, buzz! Elias nodded quickly and agreed. I'll treat her well. I promise. I always intended to. Always have, he said quickly. Good. Buzz. Please just get the taser away from my balls. Oh, forgot it was there for a second. Neither of them believed it. And would you believe the guy stuck around after that? A few months later, they were engaged. I, Diana, the only bully in my cousin's life, must ensure it remains that way. Buzz, zap! I will treat her like my ancestor. I rub her shoulders every night. I make breakfast every day. Buzz. I'll never bully her ever. Now don't say that. I like it when you bully me, Claire said amused from the doorway. Elias looks at her tearfully. Please don't say that when her hand is on the button. Diana's just using a sound app on her phone? It wasn't the first time. Elias's trauma, aside the engagement party, went well. Of course it did. My assistant is fantastic. I sent him a red envelope with a smile. Shouldn't you be sending that to the bride and groom? Nathan's amused voice came from behind me. I turned with a smile. Today, in his black tailored suit, he looked particularly good. His glasses, however, were dangling a bit dangerously. I leaned forward and slid them back up his nose with one finger. It's a bonus for good work. Nathan looked like he wanted to say something, but then I heard my dad call me over. He merely shook his head and said he would tell me later. When Claire and Elias finally got married, I decided to reinforce Elias's trauma and brainwashing. I stomped up to Claire's husband and pointed my finger at him warningly. Remember, he nodded his head vigorously, even smiling a bit. I'll treat Claire very well. I promise. Diana, you don't have to worry anymore. I relaxed a bit and then looked at Claire with teary eyes. I couldn't believe she was finally getting married. I pulled my scarf out of my purse and dabbed my eyes. The scarf looked suspiciously like money. I raised you well, but you have to always remember what I said that day. Claire leaned forward and gave me a big hug. I remember. Only cousin can bully me. 3 years later, shockingly enough, I was the one getting married. It was to my personal assistant, Nathan, of all people. Apparently, he had been in love with me for a few years. I had been stunned when he started his pursuit. I had called Claire in confusion. She only laughed at me and said that he had been waiting for me to notice him for years. And then Claire added quietly, Cousin, you wanted to marry for love, right? It's been staring at you from behind a clipboard for about 4 years now. At my wedding, Claire came up to me with her husband Elias, my 2-year-old niece Elena, and my 1-year-old nephew Jordan. She gave me a big hug and whispered in my ear, Diana, cousin, thank you for choosing me back then. Extra Claire's POV. Claire looked down at her newly decorated nails and closed her eyes. The memories came flooding back. The first life, the lonely marriage with Liam, watching from the sidelines as her cousin slowly became more and more miserable. Also, secretly miserable. The second life. Julian, the contracts, the investments, the fortune, the hollow business like marriage, the artificially inseminated child that grew inside her, the cold look she'd given Diana after the divorce. Diana, have you finally gotten what you wanted? Claire had regretted saying it, but not immediately. It hadn't fixed anything. It didn't give her the satisfaction that she thought she would feel. When she was in her 40s, she learned about her cousin's death. And then Claire realized something. The second life she had lived was just as hollow as the first. Then, death, darkness, and waking up 18 years old again. She had been terrified, absolutely terrified. She hadn't known what to do. Both men led to a dead end, a marriage that only looked good from the outside. What could she possibly do now? Leave the family before they could marry her off? With what money? Where could she go? Then her bedroom door had flown open. Her cousin Diana had marched over, grabbed her shoulders, declared she was a pushover, and informed her that only she was allowed to bully her, and then proceeded to blow up both marriage contracts, freeing both of them from their previous miserable lives. She laughed quietly to herself. Only you could start a third life like that. She looked down at her nails again. Beautiful. Done with painstaking care, hidden behind excuse after excuse. I'm just practicing. You're the practice model. I can't ruin Mom's nails. Liar. Claire whispered it fondly. You just wanted to do my nails. Diana would probably die before admitting she'd done something nice simply because she wanted to. Everything had to come wrapped in insults, wrapped in pride, wrapped in excuses. But actions were louder than words. And today, Diana had looked happy. Truly happy. Not because someone had praised her. Not because she'd won. Not because she'd gotten her way. Simply because she'd made someone she cared about smile. And today, Claire was the person Diana cared about. Claire rested her chin on her knees. So, what are you planning this time? She didn't know. Didn't need to. The future had already changed. The marriages hadn't happened. She was going to university. Diana was building a business instead of chasing after men who would never love her. Everything was different. Maybe that was enough. I think this time I'll just stand back and watch. I want to see how you live this life. A soft laugh escaped her lips. And this time, I want to truly live it as well. Outside her bedroom, somewhere down the hall, she could hear her cousin, Diana, arguing with Uncle about why buying an industrial grade espresso machine for the house was a necessary business expense. And also, she needed a personal assistant ASAP. Claire's smile widened. This life already seems much more interesting. Thank you for listening to LBD Readers.